It has been 5 years since your father died. 5 full years, Julian, and now you come here, to my door, demanding this house as if it were yours, as if you had any right after all this time. I shouted that with all the strength I had left in my chest. My voice sounded louder than I expected, almost broken by rage and disbelief. He was standing there in the doorway, with that woman at his side, Veronica, his wife, and behind them, a man with locksmith tools hanging from his belt. Julian did not even look me in the eye when he responded. "We are going to change the locks, Mom, and afterward, Veronica will explain everything to you." His voice was cold, mechanical, as if he were reading instructions from a manual. I could not believe what I was hearing. My hands trembled, gripping the doorframe. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. Change the locks. On my house. The house where I had lived for 30 years with his father. The house I cleaned alone after he died. The house where I spent entire nights crying while Julian disappeared without a word. Veronica stepped forward with a false smile drawn on her lips. "Eleanor, we understand this is difficult for you, but you have to understand that this property also belongs to Julian. He has legal rights." Her tone was soft, rehearsed, as if she had practiced those words in front of a mirror. "Legal rights," I repeated, almost breathless. "Legal rights to what? You have not set foot in this house in 5 years. You did not come when I was sick. You did not call on Christmas. You did not even send a text on my birthday. And now you come talking about rights." Julian sighed impatiently, as if I were a capricious child who did not understand important things. "Mom, do not make this harder than it already is. We need to resolve this civilly. We already spoke to a lawyer. Everything is in order." A lawyer. They spoke to a lawyer. But they never spoke to me. They never asked how I was. They never wanted to know if I needed help with the bills, with the house repairs, with the weight of the loneliness I carried every day. The locksmith cleared his throat behind them. "Excuse me, but I need to know if I am working or not. I have other clients waiting." His voice sounded uncomfortable, as if he wanted to be anywhere else but there. Julian turned to him decisively. "Yes, go ahead. Start with the main lock." He extended a folded bill, which the man took without looking at me. "No, you are not going to touch anything in this house." I stepped outside, blocking the entrance with my body. "You may have paid him, but this is my house, and nobody is going to change any locks as long as I am alive." Veronica let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Eleanor, you have no authority to stop this. Julian is a co-owner of this property. We checked the documents. Your husband left the property in both of their names. You cannot refuse." I felt a knot tighten in my throat. Co-owner. That word hit me like a closed fist. It was true that the house had been in my husband's and Julian's names for years. A decision we made when Julian was young, when we still believed he would stay close, that he would take care of us in our old age. How naive we were. "But that does not mean you can throw me out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I live here. This is my home. I have paid all the utilities, all the property taxes, all the maintenance for 5 years. Alone. Nobody is going to throw you out, Mom." Julian finally looked at me, but his eyes were empty. "We are just going to make some changes. We need to use part of the house. Veronica and I are having financial problems, and we thought we could rent out a section, or maybe sell. We have not decided yet." Sell. That word shot through me like a cold bolt of lightning. They wanted to sell the house where I raised my son, the house where I cared for my sick husband for 2 years before he died, the house where I kept every memory of an entire lifetime. "You are crazy if you think I am going to allow this." My voice broke, but I did not care. "I am not going to let you come here after all this time and destroy the only thing I have left." Veronica crossed her arms and looked at me with feigned pity. "Ma'am, I understand you are upset, but this is not negotiable. We have already made a decision. You can stay in one of the rooms if you want, but the rest of the house is going to change. We need that money." The locksmith shifted uncomfortably again and looked at his watch. "Look, I am just going to leave. This seems like a family matter, and I do not want to get in trouble." Julian stopped him with a gesture. "No, you stay. I am paying you for a job, and you are going to do it. Nobody here has any problems. My mother is just a little confused." Confused. He called me confused. as if I were a senile old woman who did not understand what was happening, as if my 30 years in that house meant nothing, as if my pain did not matter. I am not confused, Julian. I am furious, I am disappointed, and I am disgusted to see what you have become. Your father would be devastated if he saw this. Do not bring my father into this, he replied harshly. He is not here anymore. And life goes on. We need to be practical. Practical. That was his excuse. Being practical meant forgetting love, forgetting loyalty, forgetting that I was his mother and that I had given everything for him since the day he was born. Veronica moved closer to me and lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. Eleanor, I know this is hard, but think about your son. He has a family now. He has responsibilities. He cannot keep depending on you for everything. Depending on me. The irony was so thick it almost made me laugh. He had not depended on me for anything in 5 years. I was the one who had depended on the memory of better times, just to keep going. Just then, someone coughed behind Julian. A loud, deliberate cough that made us all turn. It was Ruth, my neighbor for my entire life. She was standing on the sidewalk with a grocery bag in her hand and a look of deep concern on her wrinkled face. Her gray eyes scanned the scene on my doorstep with a mix of alarm and disapproval. Eleanor, is everything all right over there? She asked, her voice firm, though her age made it tremble slightly. I heard shouting from my house. Julian barely glanced at her for a second before turning his attention back to me, as if Ruth were invisible. Everything is fine, ma'am. It is a family matter. But Ruth did not move. She stayed exactly where she was, holding her grocery bag like a shield. I have known Eleanor for 20 years, and I have never heard her shout like that. If it is a family matter, you should be resolving it with respect. Veronica let out an exaggerated sigh of impatience. With all due respect, ma'am, this is none of your business. I suggest you go on with your day. Ruth pressed her lips together but did not back down. I will stay right where I can see that Eleanor is okay. Thank you. And if I have to, I will call whoever I need to call. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over my chest. Ruth had always been like that. Direct, brave, loyal. We had shared coffee in her kitchen for years. We cried together when her husband died 6 months after mine. We supported each other on the darkest days when our children left us alone. You do not need to call anyone, Ruth, I said, trying to sound calm, though my heart was beating like a war drum. It is just an unexpected visit. Unexpected, she repeated with obvious sarcasm. An unexpected visit with a locksmith. Eleanor, if you need help, just say the word. Julian finally turned completely toward Ruth, his irritation clear in his posture. Look, ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but this is between my mother and me. We do not need spectators. I am not a spectator, Ruth replied, unflinching. I am her neighbor and her friend. And I have seen how Eleanor has lived these past 5 years. Alone, working, struggling, without any help from you. The locksmith took advantage of the tense moment to take another step back. Look, seriously, I am better off leaving. I am not paid enough for this. Julian quickly pulled out his wallet and extracted several bills. I will pay you double. Just do your job and finish quickly. The man looked at the bills. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at Ruth, who was still planted on the sidewalk like a sentinel. The discomfort on his face was plain. I do not like this, sir. It looks like the lady does not agree with this. She does not have to agree, Veronica interjected coldly. Legally, my husband has the right to make changes to this property. If you do not want to do the job, there are 10 other locksmiths who will. The man shook his head slowly. No thanks. I do not work in situations like this. Keep your money. And without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked toward his van parked down the street. Julian called after him, his voice loud and frustrated. Hey, wait, we have a deal. But the locksmith was already getting into his vehicle. He started the engine and drove away without looking back, leaving a cloud of tension hanging in the hot afternoon air. Veronica turned to Julian, her expression annoyed. This is your mother's fault, and her meddling friend. Now we will have to find another locksmith. My fault? I repeated, feeling the anger surge in my chest again. My fault for not letting you rob me of my own home? Nobody is robbing you of anything. Julian shouted, finally losing his composure. This house is as much mine as it is yours, and if I need to use it, I am going to use it. Ruth stepped forward from the sidewalk. Young man, I suggest you lower your voice when you speak to your mother. I do not know how you were raised, but where I come from, that is called disrespect. Julian glared at her with fiery eyes. You do not know anything about my family, ma'am. Nothing about what we have been through. So I am kindly asking you to mind your own business. I know that 5 years ago, they buried a good man in the city cemetery, Ruth replied, her voice steady. And I know that since that day, Eleanor has not received a single call from her son. I do know that. The whole neighborhood knows it. Veronica let out a dry, bitter laugh. Oh, of course. The nosy neighbors who have nothing better to do than meddle in other people's lives. It is not meddling when you see a woman crying alone in her garden every Sunday, Ruth retorted. It is not meddling when you help her carry her groceries from the market because nobody else does. It is not meddling when you share your food with her because she still cooks for 2, but only eats for 1. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I held them back. I did not want to cry in front of them. I did not want to give them that satisfaction. Julian took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Look, this is getting out of hand. Mom, we are going to come back another time when you are calmer. But I want you to know that this is going to happen regardless, with or without your cooperation. Nothing is going to happen, I said, with all the firmness I could muster. This is my house, and as long as I live, nobody is coming in here to change locks or sell anything. Veronica looked at me with a mix of pity and contempt. Ma'am, you do not understand the legal situation you are in. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. But one way or another, we are going to get access to this property. The hard way? I repeated, feeling a chill run down my spine. Are you threatening me in my own home? It is not a threat, it is a reality, she replied, crossing her arms. We have rights, and we are going to exercise them. Julian took Veronica by the arm. Let's go. We did what we came to do. She knows what is going to happen now. They turned and began walking toward their car, parked 3 houses down. A silver gray sedan that looked too new and luxurious for someone claiming to have financial problems. Ruth immediately crossed the street and came up the steps to my entryway. She took my hands, which were still shaking. Eleanor, you have to call a lawyer. This is serious. I do not have money for lawyers, Ruth. I can barely pay the utilities each month. She squeezed my hands tightly. Then we will talk to the legal aid office at the community center. They help seniors for free. You cannot let them do this to you. I nodded slowly, though my mind was clouded with shock. Everything had happened so fast. An hour ago, I was watering my plants in the garden, enjoying the silence of my afternoon, and now my entire world was crumbling again. Come on, let's go inside, Ruth said, guiding me indoors. I am going to make you some tea, and we are going to figure out what to do. We went into my house together. Ruth closed the door behind us and slid the deadbolt. The sound of the lock clicking into place made me feel a little safer, though I knew it was a false security. If Julian truly had legal rights to the property, that deadbolt meant nothing. My living room looked the same as always. The same furniture I had bought with my husband 20 years ago. The same brown sofa where he sat to watch the news every night. The same coffee table where I put my coffee every morning. The same white curtains I washed every month without fail. Everything was exactly the same. But something had changed forever. Ruth took me to the kitchen and sat me down in one of the chairs while she filled the kettle with water. My hands were still trembling on the worn wooden table. I looked out the window toward the backyard, where my husband had planted a lemon tree 15 years ago. The tree was still there, strong and leafy, bearing fruit every season. How did we get to this point, Ruth? I whispered, more to myself than to her. We got here because some people only see value in things when they need them, she replied, placing the kettle on the stove. Your son did not value this house when he had somewhere else to live. Now that he has problems, he remembered it existed. But he is my son, I said, feeling guilt mix with the anger. Maybe I should help him. Maybe I am the selfish one for wanting to keep this whole house to myself. Ruth turned to me with a severe expression. Eleanor Godinez, do not you dare say that. You are not selfish. You worked for this house. You maintained it. You cared for it. And you did it alone while he disappeared. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. The wall clock in the hallway marked every second with its steady tick-tock. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The wind gently rustled the branches of the lemon tree against the bedroom window. This house had its own language, a language I had learned over 30 years. I knew every creak of the wooden floor, every stain on the walls I had tried to cover with paint, every corner that held a story. I remembered the day my husband and I bought this house. I was 40 years old. Julian was 15. We had saved for 10 years to scrape together the down payment. I worked cleaning other people's houses so that one day I could have my own. My husband worked in construction, sometimes 12 hours a day under the relentless Sunday. The day they gave us the keys, the three of us walked in together. The house was empty, with the walls painted a cream color that looked old and sad. But to us, it was a palace. It was our palace. Julian ran through all the rooms, shouting with excitement. "Mom, Dad, look, my room has a closet, and it has a big window. I can put my bed here and my desk over there." His voice was still high-pitched, full of a pure happiness that now seemed impossible to imagine. My husband hugged me in the middle of the empty living room. "We did it, Eleanor. We finally did it." His eyes were moist with tears he refused to shed. We spent weeks painting, fixing, cleaning. We bought second-hand furniture that we restored together. I sewed the curtains by hand because we did not have money to buy new ones. My husband repaired the backyard fence and planted the lemon tree that now shaded the entire yard. This house was built with love, with effort, with every dollar we could save by sacrificing meals, new clothes, and nights out. It was all worth it because we had our own place. A place to raise our son. A safe place. Julian grew up in this house. He learned to ride his bike on the street out front. He did his homework at the dining room table for years. He celebrated all his birthdays in the backyard. His friends would come over to play, and I would make them fresh lemonade from the tree his father had planted. When Julian turned 18, my husband decided it was time to include him on the property deed. I was not sure. He seemed too young, but my husband insisted. "He is our only son, Eleanor. This house will be his one day anyway. It is better to do it now. That way, if anything happens to us, he will be protected." His logic seemed sound at the time. We went to the notary public together. We signed papers. Julian became a co-owner alongside his father. I was not on the documents because at the time I was working without formal papers, and it was more complicated to include me. My husband promised me we would fix that later, but we never did. There was always something more urgent. There was always some unexpected expense. Julian left home when he turned 23. He got a job in another city and rented a small apartment. The visits became less frequent. First, he came every weekend, then every 2 weeks, then once a month, then only on holidays. He met Veronica when he was 28. She worked at the same company, in the sales department. She was pretty, well-dressed, with an air of confidence that intimidated me a little. She talked about numbers, investments, business opportunities, things I did not fully understand. The first time he brought her home, she looked around with an expression I could not decipher. She did not say anything bad, but she did not say anything good either. She just observed with those calculating eyes that seemed to be sizing up every object. "It is cozy." That was all she said when I asked what she thought of the house. A word that sounded like a compliment, but seemed like something else coming from her. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony. My husband and I were the only family members from Julian's side present. Veronica's parents lived in another state and could not travel, according to her, though I later learned they simply did not approve of their daughter marrying someone from our social class. After the wedding, the visits became even rarer. Julian always had excuses. "We are busy with work. We are saving to buy our own place. Veronica is not feeling well. We have social commitments." My husband started to get sick when Julian was 32. At first, it was minor symptoms. Excessive fatigue, chest pain, difficulty breathing after climbing stairs. But the symptoms worsened quickly. The diagnosis came like a devastating blow. Advanced congestive heart failure. The doctors told us he needed urgent surgery, a surgery that cost thousands of dollars. Health insurance covered only part of it. We needed to raise $15,000 to cover the rest. I called Julian, crying. Your father is very sick. He needs an operation. We need help. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard voices in the background. Julian talking to Veronica in murmurs I could not understand. Finally he answered, Mom, we're in a tough spot financially, too. We invested in a business that did not work out. We do not have any savings right now. But it is your father, I pleaded. He is very ill. The doctors say he could die without the surgery. Another silence. I see. Well, let me talk to Veronica and see what we can do. I will call you back. He never called back. Days passed, then weeks. I would call and leave messages. Julian, please, pick up. Your father asks about you every day. We need to talk about the operation. He finally answered after 2 weeks. Mom, I already told you we do not have the money. Veronica and I talked, and it is just not possible right now. I am sorry. I sold everything I could, jewelry my husband had given me over the years, a living room set we had bought new 5 years earlier, my husband's construction tools that still had value. I asked for loans from neighbors, from old colleagues, from anyone who could help. Ruth lent me $2,000 that she had saved to fix her roof. Eleanor, your husband is a good man. He deserves that operation. I will fix my roof later. I gathered the full amount, 3 months after the diagnosis. 3 months during which my husband deteriorated more each day. 3 months in which Julian never showed up, not even once, to see his father. The surgery was finally performed. It was successful, according to the doctors. But my husband came out weak, very weak. He needed constant care, expensive medications, physical therapy, frequent follow-ups. I left my house-cleaning job to take care of him. I could not leave him alone. We lived on his retirement pension, which barely covered the medications and basic food. We fell behind on some utility bills. The house began to deteriorate because there was no money for repairs. Julian came to visit us once during those 2 years of illness, a single time. He came into the house, greeted his father briefly, stayed for less than an hour, and left, promising he would be back soon. He did not come back. My husband asked about him constantly. Eleanor, have you heard from Julian? Do you think he will come this weekend? Maybe we should call him. I made excuses. He is very busy with work, dear. You know how companies are now. But he will come soon. You will see. My husband died on a Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand when his breathing stopped. The sun streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating his tired face. His last words were, "Take care of the house, Eleanor. It is the only thing we can leave for Julian." I called my son, sobbing. "Your father is gone. I just lost him. Please, come." "I am on my way," he replied, his voice flat. "I will be there in a few hours." He arrived at the funeral dressed in an expensive black suit. Veronica was at his side with dark sunglasses and an elegant dress. They looked like models in a magazine, not mourners at a burial. Julian was at the funeral for barely 2 hours. He did not cry. He did not hug anyone. He stood by the grave with his hands in his pockets while the priest read the prayers. Veronica checked her phone discreetly, hiding it behind her purse whenever someone looked at her. After the burial, they came to the house. The few neighbors who attended brought food, as was the custom, casseroles, cold cuts, and some cakes. Ruth organized everything on the dining room table while I sat on the sofa, numb with grief and exhaustion. Julian approached me with an expression that tried to be compassionate but did not reach his eyes. "Mom, I am very sorry for your loss. Dad was a good man." "He was your father," I replied, my voice breaking. "Your loss, too." He nodded vaguely and looked around the living room. "We are going to have to talk about the house at some point, about the papers, about what we are going to do now." I felt a chill run down my spine despite the heat of the day. "Not now, Julian. We just buried your father." I know. It is not the time. I am just saying, eventually, We will have to sort out the practical things. Veronica and I can help you with the legal paperwork if you need. Ruth appeared just then with a plate of food, which she tried to hand me. Eleanor, you have to eat something. You have not had a bite all day. I am not hungry, Ruth. She left the plate on the coffee table anyway. Well, it is here for when you are. Veronica moved closer to Julian and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and turned back to me. Mom, we have to get back to the city. Veronica has to work early tomorrow, but we will call you in a few days to see how you are. They left before nightfall. I watched them get into their gray car and drive down the street without looking back. That was the last time I saw my son in 5 years. The following days were a blur of grief and confusion. I had to file death certificates, cancel accounts, notify institutions. Everything seemed designed to be impossible to complete. Every office asked for different documents. Every process required waiting for hours in long lines. Ruth went with me everywhere. She held my arm when my legs felt weak. She explained what the clerks were saying when my mind drifted in grief. She took me back home when I could not remember how I had even gotten there. My husband's pension stopped after his death. I was not entitled to it because we had not formalized certain papers years ago. Another mistake from the past that was now costing me dearly. I was left with no income overnight. I looked for work, but nobody wanted to hire a 65-year-old woman with no formal education. The few houses where I had cleaned already had new, younger maids. One woman told me apologetically, "I am sorry, Eleanor, but I need someone who can lift heavy things and go up and down stairs quickly. You are just not at an age for this work anymore." I had to apply for government assistance, food stamps, vouchers for medicine, help with the basic utilities. Every month was a struggle to make it to the next. I stopped buying meat. I stopped turning on the heat in winter. I wore the same clothes until they fell apart because there was no money for new ones. I called Julian every week at first. "Son, I need help with the house expenses. The property taxes are overdue. The water is about to be shut off." He always had the same answer. "Mom, we are going through a tough time. I told you, we made a bad investment and lost money. We cannot help you right now." "But I am your mother," I would say, my pleading voice shaming me. "I know, Mom, but I have to take care of my wife too. We have our own debts. You have to understand." The calls became less frequent. Every time I dialed, he would let it go to voicemail. When he did answer, the conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. He always had to go. There was always something more important. I stopped calling after the first year. My pride was wounded, but more than that, I was tired. Tired of begging. Tired of feeling like a burden. Tired of hearing excuses. Ruth visited me every day. She brought food that she claimed was left over, but I knew she had cooked it especially for me. We shared coffee in my kitchen and talked about everything except our absent children. Over time, a wound began to heal. Not to close completely, but to ache less. I learned to live with Julian's absence, the way you learn to live with a scar. It is there. It hurts sometimes, but it no longer stops you from walking. I found small, odd jobs. I tended a neighbor's garden in exchange for a few dollars. I sewed clothes for another lady who owned an alteration shop. It was not much, but added to the government assistance, it was enough to survive. The house slowly deteriorated. The paint peeled. The roof began to leak in one corner when it rained. A window broke, and I repaired it with duct tape and cardboard because there was no money for a new pane of glass. The garden my husband had tended with such love became overgrown with weeds. But I was still there. I was still cleaning what I could. I was still repairing what I could. This house was the only thing I had left of my former life. Of the years when I had a family, when I had a clear purpose, I established a routine that kept me sane. I got up at 6 in the morning. I made coffee. I watered the few plants that survived in the garden. I swept the front walk. I listened to the radio while I sewed or cleaned. In the afternoons, Ruth would come over, and we would have tea. At night, I would look at old photographs of when Julian was a boy and my husband was still alive. The neighbors were kind. Mr. Marco from the corner house brought me lemons when his tree produced too many. Mrs. Patricia gave me bread when she baked. No one asked about Julian directly, but I knew they all wondered where my son was. 5 years passed just like that. 5 years of loneliness, of silence, of days that all looked the same. They were not happy years, but they were not completely miserable either. There was a certain peace in the simplicity, in knowing exactly what to expect from each day. Until today. Until Julian showed up at my door with his wife and a locksmith. Now, sitting in the darkness of my room, all those memories flooded me like a cold wave. I finally understood why he had come. Not for love, not for repentance, not to reconcile. He had come for the house, for money, for the only thing of value I still possessed. The rage I felt at the door had given way to something deeper, an immense sadness that squeezed my chest. It was not just the threat of losing my home. It was the confirmation that the son I had raised, the boy I had held in my arms, the young man who had cried with joy when we got this house, no longer existed. In his place was a stranger with his face, a man capable of looking his 70-year-old mother in the eye and demanding she hand over her home. I got out of bed when the clock struck 4 in the morning. There was no point in pretending I could sleep. I went to the kitchen and put water on to boil for coffee. The house was cold. I lit the stove and watched the blue flame as the water began to heat. I thought about what Ruth had said. I needed a lawyer. I needed legal help. But the idea terrified me. I knew nothing about laws. I did not understand legal papers. What if I went to a lawyer and they told me Julian was right? That legally, he could do whatever he wanted with the house. The water boiled, and I made my coffee. I drank it standing by the kitchen window, looking out at the dark garden. The lemon tree was just a black silhouette against the sky, which was beginning to lighten. My husband planted that tree thinking of the future, thinking that one day Julian would bring his children to this house and they would play under its shade, just as Julian had played under other trees. Thinking that this house would be a place for family gatherings, for laughter, for love. How wrong we were. I heard a soft knock on the front door. My heart jumped in fear. I looked at the clock. It was barely 5 in the morning. Who could be knocking at this hour? I walked slowly to the door, holding my coffee mug as if it were a weapon. I looked through the peephole. It was Ruth, wrapped in an old bathrobe, her hair pulled back. I opened the door quickly. "Ruth, what are you doing here so early? Did something happen?" She walked in without waiting for an invitation. "I saw your light on from my window. I knew you had not slept. I could not sleep either. I was thinking all night about what happened yesterday." I closed the door and led her to the kitchen. "I will make you some coffee. I already made some. Thank you." Ruth sat down in one of the chairs and pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I wrote down the names of some places we can go today. The community center opens at 8. They have lawyers who give free consultations on Fridays. Today is Friday." I felt a knot in my stomach. "Ruth, I do not know if I can do this. What if they tell me Julian has a right to everything? What if I lose the house anyway?" She reached out her wrinkled hand and took mine. "Eleanor, if you do nothing, you will definitely lose. If you try to defend yourself, you at least have a chance. You cannot give up without AF fight." I nodded slowly, though fear paralyzed me. "You are right, but I am so scared, Ruth. I do not understand any of this legal stuff. That is why we are going together. I will be with you every step of the way. And if those lawyers cannot help, we will find others. We are not going to let Julian take what is yours." We sat in silence until the sun was fully up. Seeing the sunrise through the kitchen window gave me a small spark of hope. A new day, a new chance to fight. By 7:30, we were dressed and ready. Ruth had lent me a sweater because mine had a hole in the elbow, and she insisted we had to look presentable. We took the bus downtown. The community center was an old, 2-story building painted a pale yellow. There was a sign at the entrance advertising various services: English classes, legal support, medical advice, support groups. We went in, and a young receptionist greeted us with a smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Ruth spoke for me. "We are here for a legal consultation. We have an emergency related to a property." The receptionist checked a list on her computer. "The lawyer on duty today is Mr. Santiago." He already has 2 people waiting, but I can put you on the list. What is the name? Eleonor Godinez, I replied, my voice trembling. All right, Miss Godinez. Please have a seat in the waiting area. They will call you when it is your turn. We sat in hard plastic chairs next to other people who were also waiting. A young woman with a baby in her arms, an older man with a cane, all with expressions of worry similar to mine. We waited for almost 2 hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. My mind kept rehearsing what I would say. How would I explain my situation without sounding like a confused old woman? How would I make them understand that this was not just a dispute over property, but over my entire life? Finally, my name was called, Eleanor Godinez. Mr. Santiago will see you now. Ruth stood up with me. I am coming with you. The lawyer's office was small but tidy. Mr. Santiago was a man in his 50s with thick glasses and a kind smile. He motioned for us to sit in the chairs opposite his desk, which was piled high with folders. Good morning, ladies. How can I help you today? I took a deep breath and began to tell my story. I explained about the house, about how my husband and Julian were co-owners, about the 5 years of absence, about the sudden appearance yesterday with the locksmith. My voice cracked at times, but I continued until I was finished. Mr. Santiago took notes while I spoke. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I understand your situation, Miss Godinez, and I am very sorry for what you are going through. Let me explain the legal situation. My heart was beating so loud I thought he could hear it. Your son, as a registered co-owner of the property, technically has rights to the house. However, the fact that you have lived there for 30 years and have been the only one maintaining the property for the last 5 years gives you certain rights as well, especially considering your age and financial situation. So I can stay in my house? I asked hopefully. It is not that simple. Your son cannot just change the locks and throw you out. That would be an illegal eviction. You have the right to continue living there, but he could start a legal process to partition the property or force its sale. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Force a sale. Those words were a death sentence. However, the lawyer continued, there are several factors in your favor. Your age, your financial dependence on the home, your son's abandonment for years, and the fact that you have paid all the expenses. A judge might order that the property remain as it is, especially if it is proven that you have nowhere else to live. What do I need to do? I asked. First, we need to document everything. Receipts for utility payments, taxes, maintenance. Anything that proves you have been solely responsible for the house. Second, we need witnesses to confirm that your son abandoned you. Third, and this is important, you cannot allow him to enter the house or make any changes without legal authorization. Ruth chimed in. Yesterday, they tried to bring a locksmith, but the man left when he saw it was a conflicting situation. Very good. That is excellent. If they try again, you must call the police immediately. The lawyer took a card from his desk. This is my number. If your son returns, call me immediately. I am going to prepare a cease and desist letter to send him formally. Does that cost money? I asked, ashamed. This service is free for low-income individuals. Miss Godinez, do not worry about that right now. Worry about gathering all those documents I mentioned. We left the office with the lawyer's card clutched in my hand. Ruth hugged me in the middle of the waiting room. See? I told you. There is hope. You are not alone in this. We returned home with a mixture of relief and anxiety. I spent the rest of the day digging through papers, old receipts stored in boxes, bank statements showing utility payments, property tax documents that I had paid, a loan, for 5 years. Ruth helped me organize everything into folders. Every paper was a piece of proof. Every receipt was a small victory. Together, we built a complete record of my life in that house. On Saturday morning, while Ruth and I were drinking coffee in the kitchen, reviewing the documents one more time, we heard a car park in front of the house. My stomach clenched immediately. I looked out the window. It was Julian's gray car. He is here again. Ruth stood up quickly and pulled out her phone. I am calling Mr. Santiago. But before she could dial, there was a knock on the door. It was not a loud, aggressive knock as I expected. It was soft, almost timid. I approached cautiously and looked through the peephole. Julian was alone. There was no sign of Veronica or any locksmith. He looked different. He had dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled. I opened the door but kept the security chain on. "What do you want, Julian?" He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Mom, I just want to talk. Please. No lawyers, no Veronica, just you and me." Ruth appeared behind me. "Eleanor, you do not have to talk to him if you do not want to." But something in Julian's voice sounded different. Softer. More like the son I remembered from years ago. "It is okay, Ruth. I am going to hear what he has to say, but I am staying right here at the door." Julian nodded. "I understand. Mom, I came to apologize. What I did the other day was wrong. Very wrong. Veronica convinced me it was the only solution to our problems, but that is no excuse. I should not have come here like that." I felt tears welling up but held them back. "And what changed since yesterday, Julian? Why are you coming with apologies now?" He looked down. "Veronica and I had a huge fight last night. I told her I could not do this. That you were my mother, and that this house was your home. She said I was weak. That I was choosing an old woman over our future. An old woman. That is what she called me." Julian closed his eyes as if the words pained him. "Yes, and when she said that, something in me broke. I realized who I had married, what I had become." Ruth crossed her arms behind me, her expression skeptical. "Very nice words, young man. But words do not bring back 5 years of neglect." Julian glanced at her briefly, then turned his focus back to me. "You are right. I know I cannot fix those years. I know I was a bad son. That I disappeared when you needed me most. That I let Dad die practically alone." His voice broke on that last phrase. And for the first time in years, I saw something like real emotion on his face. I did not know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug him, to forgive him, to tell him everything would be okay. He was my son, the baby I had held in my arms. But another part of me, the part that had learned to survive alone these 5 years, remained alert and distrustful. "Julian, what exactly do you want now?" I asked, keeping my voice firm. "I want you to know that I am not going to take the house from you. I am not going to force you to sell. I am not going to do anything to hurt you more than I already have." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "In fact, I brought this. It is a renunciation of my rights to the property. My lawyer drew it up this morning. It just needs your signature, and the house will be completely yours." He extended the paper toward me through the narrow, chained opening of the door. My hands trembled as I took it. Ruth immediately took it from my hands to read it. "This needs to be reviewed by a lawyer before you sign anything, Eleanor," she said with authority. "Of course," Julian replied. "I am in no hurry. You can take all the time you need. I just wanted you to see that I am serious." "And Veronica agrees with this?" Ruth asked, her tone suspicious. Julian let out a bitter laugh. "Veronica left the house last night. She packed her things and went to her mother's. She said if I was not going to fight for what was ours, then she had no business being with me." I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Satisfaction that the woman who had wanted to destroy my life was out of the picture. Pity that my son was paying a high price for doing the right thing, even if it was late. "I am sorry, Julian," I said, and I meant it. "Do not be. I should have realized years ago what kind of person she is, but I was blind. I thought she made me better, more successful. In reality, she just made me colder, more selfish." There was an awkward silence. The morning sun made Julian squint. He looked tired, defeated, older than he really was. "Can I ask you something, Mom?" "What? How did you do it? How did you survive these 5 years alone, with so little money, without any help?" I took a deep breath. "I did it because I had no other choice, Julian. When your father died and you disappeared, I was completely alone, but I decided I was not going to give up. This house was the only thing I had left of my old life. It was my connection to your father, to the good years. I was not going to let it fall apart." Ruth put her hand on my shoulder in a supportive gesture. And she was not completely alone. She had friends, neighbors who became her family. Julian nodded slowly. I am glad you had someone. Because I was not there. No, you were not, I confirmed, not softening the truth. He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. Every day that passed, it became easier not to call. At first, I felt guilty. I thought about you constantly. But Veronica always had a reason why it was not a good time. We were busy. We had our own problems. You were strong and could manage on your own. Over time, those excuses became my reality. I stopped feeling guilty and just moved on. At least you are honest now, Ruth said curtly. Julian looked at her directly. You have every right to be angry with me, Mrs. Ruth. You did what I should have done. You took care of my mother when I abandoned her. I have no words to thank you for that. I do not need your thanks, young man. I did it because Eleanor is my friend, and because it was the right thing to do. I know. He looked back at me. Mom, I know I cannot repair the past. I know you will probably never fully forgive me. But I want to try to make things right now, even if it is just a little, even if it is late. What does that mean exactly? I asked cautiously. It means I want to help you. With the house, with the repairs it needs, with whatever you need. Not because I expect anything in return, but because it is what I should have been doing all along. Ruth looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I did not know what to think. Part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my son had finally come to his senses. But another part remembered the pain of 5 years of silence, the pain of unanswered calls, the pain of lonely Christmases. I need time, Julian. I need to think about all of this, and I need a lawyer to review these papers before I decide anything. He nodded in understanding. I completely understand. Take all the time you need, and if you decide you never want to see me again, I will understand that too. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry. I am truly sorry. He turned to leave, but then stopped. By the way, Mom, the money Dad needed for the operation, the $15,000. What about it? I asked, my heart pounding. We did have the money, Veronica and I. We had enough in savings. But she convinced me not to give it to you. She said your parents had had a whole lifetime to save and that it was not our responsibility. I listened to her, and that decision has haunted me every single day since. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. Ruth had to hold me up because my legs gave out. You knew your father could be saved. And you did nothing. Tears finally rolled down Julian's cheeks. I know, and there is no forgiveness for that. I just wanted you to know the truth. To know that Dad died, in part, because of my cowardice. He walked away toward his car. We watched him get in and start the engine. The gray car drove slowly down the street until it disappeared around the corner. Ruth guided me back inside the house and sat me on the sofa. I was shaking from head to toe. All the emotions I had held back for years now came pouring out. I cried like I had not cried since my husband's funeral. Ruth sat beside me, holding me while I sobbed on her shoulder. She let me get out all the pain, all the rage, all the betrayal I had kept locked in my chest. When I finally calmed down, she made me tea, and we sat in silence. The paper Julian had brought lay on the coffee table, a paper that supposedly would give me full ownership of the house. Do you think he is serious, Ruth? Or is this just another manipulation? She sipped her tea thoughtfully. Honestly, I do not know, Eleanor. He sounded sincere, but he also sounded sincere when he promised to visit you after your husband's funeral. You are right. I cannot trust his words alone. I need to see actions. We will call Mr. Santiago on Monday. Let him review that document. And in the meantime, do not let your guard down. We spent the rest of the day organizing more documents and avoiding talking about Julian. But his words kept echoing in my head, especially the confession about the money for my husband's operation. That night, alone in my bed again, I thought about my husband, about how he had suffered, waiting for an operation that could have been done months earlier, about how he had died thinking his son simply could not help, never knowing the truth was that he would not help. The anger rose in my chest again. But this time, it was different. It was not a blind, desperate rage. It was a cold, calculating anger. An anger that gave me clarity instead of confusion. Julian had said he wanted to make things right, that he wanted to help. We would see if he kept his word. But I was not going to wait around passively. I was going to make sure this house was legally mine, no matter what Julian said or did. Sunday dawned cloudy and cold. I went to church for the first time in months. I sat in the back pew and listened to the priest talk about forgiveness and redemption, pretty words that sounded simple from the pulpit, but were infinitely complicated in real life. On Monday morning, Ruth and I were waiting outside the community center before the doors even opened. I had the document Julian had given me tucked into a folder along with all the other papers we had gathered. Mr. Santiago greeted us with the same kindness as before. Miss Godinez, Mrs. Ruth, please come in. I see you brought more documents. I handed him everything. The receipts, the bank statements, and finally, the paper Julian had brought on Saturday. The lawyer put on his thick glasses and began to read it carefully. Several minutes passed in silence as he examined every page. I wrung my hands in my lap, nervous about what he would say. Finally, he looked up. This document is a renunciation of rights to the property. If you sign this, and your son also signs it before a notary, the house would become entirely yours. It is legally valid. So it is real? I asked, unable to fully believe it. The document itself is real, yes. But let me ask you a question, Miss Godinez. Do you trust your son? The question hit me like cold water. I do not know, I answered honestly. I want to trust him. He is my son, but he has hurt me so much. Mr. Santiago leaned back in his chair. I understand your dilemma. My recommendation is that we proceed with caution. First, I will contact your son's lawyer to verify that this document was prepared legitimately. Second, if everything is in order, we will schedule a signing at a notary's office where you are both present. And third, we will ensure the change of ownership is filed immediately with the county recorder. That sounds prudent, Ruth said. There is one more thing I should mention. The lawyer pulled another paper from his desk. I prepared the cease and desist letter I mentioned last week. But given this new development, perhaps it is not necessary to send it just yet. What would you prefer to do? I thought for a moment. Send it anyway. Until that house is completely in my name, I want to have every possible protection. Very well. I will send it today by certified mail. We left the office with a strange feeling. It was not hope, exactly, but it was not despair either. It was something in between, a possibility that things might be resolved. The next few days were an anxious wait. Mr. Santiago called me on Wednesday to confirm that he had spoken with Julian's lawyer and that everything seemed to be in order. We scheduled an appointment at the notary's office for the following Friday. Julian called me on Thursday night. It was strange to see his name on my phone screen after so much willful silence. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello? Mom. Hi. Hello, Julian. There was an awkward silence. I found out what happened with Veronica. I am glad it is resolved. Yes, it is resolved. Another silence. Mom, I know you probably do not want to hear from me, and I get it, but I wanted you to know that Veronica and I are officially getting divorced. She got another job in another city and moved out. I am sorry your marriage ended like that. I am not. It was the best thing that could have happened. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. He took a deep breath. Mom, I know I have no right to ask you this, but I would like to come visit you sometime. Not to ask for anything, not to talk about houses or money. Just to see you. To try to get to know you again. My first instinct was to say no. To tell him he had caused too much pain and there was no room for him in my life now. But then, I thought of my husband. Of how he had loved Julian unconditionally until the very end. Of how his last words had been about taking care of the house for our son. You can come, I said finally. But on one condition. What is it? You come alone. No hidden agendas. No plans. Just as a son visiting his mother. And if at any moment I feel like you are lying or manipulating me, I will ask you to leave and never come back. I accept those conditions completely. Then come next Sunday. At 2 in the afternoon. I will make coffee. I will be there. Thank you, Mom. I hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time. I did not know if I was doing the right thing. I did not know if Julian had really changed or if this was just another performance. But I decided to give him a chance. One single chance. Sunday arrived, sunny and warm. I made coffee as I had promised and waited. At 2 o'clock exactly, I heard a car pull up. I looked out the window. Julian got out of the car. He was alone, as promised. He was wearing simple clothes, and in his hands he carried a small potted plant. I opened the door before he knocked. He looked at me with a nervous expression. "Hi, Mom. I brought this for your garden. I know Dad loved plants." I took the pot. It was a jasmine, the same kind of plant my husband used to grow. "Thank you, Julian." I invited him in. He sat on the same sofa where he had sat weeks ago, demanding the house. He looked different now, smaller, more humble. I served him coffee, and we sat in silence for a moment. "The house looks good, Mom. You have been making improvements." "Yes. Little by little, I am fixing it up. I am glad. It was always a beautiful house. Dad and you worked so hard to make it a home." "It was a home, Julian, and it still is." We spent 2 hours talking. Or rather, he talked and I listened. He told me about his divorce, about how he was going to therapy to understand why he had made the choices he made. He told me about his job and how he had asked for reduced hours to have more time to reflect on his life. I did not expect myself to believe everything he said. Words were easy. Actions were what counted. But I listened. Because that is what a mother did. She listened, even when it hurt. When he left, he gave me a brief hug at the door. Can I come back next month?" he asked. "We will see," I replied, noncommittally. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance, Mom." I watched him drive away. I did not know if he would be back. I did not know if I wanted him to come back. But I had done what felt right. That night, I sat in the garden under the lemon tree my husband had planted so many years ago. The stars were bright overhead, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. I thought about everything that had happened, about how I had been on the verge of losing everything, about how I had found a strength I never knew I had, about how the neighbors I barely knew had become my family when my own blood had abandoned me. The house was mine now, completely, legally, indisputably mine. No one could take it from me. But more important than that, I was my own. I had reclaimed my dignity, my voice, my power. I had learned that family love is not always unconditional, that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. But I had also learned that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the neighbor who brings you coffee every morning. It is the stranger who gives you her life savings to help you fight. It is the lawyer who works beyond what he is paid because he believes in justice. I touched the garden soil with my wrinkled hands. This earth I had tended for 30 years. This earth I would continue to tend for whatever time I had left. I stood up slowly and went inside my house. My home. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and went to sleep in my own bed, in my own room, in my own home. And for the first time in 5 years, I slept soundly through the entire night. No nightmares, no worries, just peace. The peace that comes when you finally stop fighting and realize you have already won.